Hello everyone, my name is Christopher Liam Rose. I'm an author, mentor, life coach, motivational speaker, evangelist, musician, and activist. In this audio and podcast, we're going to be sharing a message. I've been sharing the Spiritually Helping Other People podcast to inspire humanity to go through spiritual change, to inspire humanity to learn about Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha, to inspire humanity to help other people and give back, and to inspire humanity to learn more about the no self and selflessness. Now, within this message, we're going to be sharing a very important message. Um, this message is called Death of the Self, Rebirth of the No Self. Now, this becomes a very spiritual, faithful, and truthful thing to learn. Now, in life, everybody has the self, right, which is our life experiences, the challenges we've been through, our suffering, our pains and adversities, and our whole life experience. So that's what we call the self. The self has suffering, pain, and adversity within it. All human beings will go through suffering, pain, and adversity because of the self. So the self becomes a very destructive, negative, and selfish thing to just live your life with, right? So it's important that we die to the self. We die to all our life experiences, our suffering, pains, and adversities, our struggles, and everything that we've experienced. If we die to the self, which is a very hard thing to do, and it takes a lot of spiritual transformation, spiritual awakening, spiritual guidance, and spiritual freedom and liberation to find it. But if we die to the self, then we actually get rebirthed to the no self. And this is when the spiritual transformation of the psyche and the psychological mind comes to humanity, right? So the no self and selflessness is basically living your life where there's no more self, there's no more I, there's no more me, there's no more my. And you're free to live your spiritual life purpose and spiritual calling within life. Now, the death of the self becomes the most important thing to learn. If you don't die to the self, you'll always live with suffering, pain, and adversities, and you'll always go through just problems within your life and situations within your life. So, the hardest thing to do is die to the self. And dying to the self doesn't mean you pass away. It means dying to the attachments, the cravings, the ego, the self-esteem, just the selfish ambitions, selfish desires, and actually changing your life to be rebirthed of the no self and the no self. So life becomes more simple once we know the no self and selflessness. So the reason why a lot of people keep going through suffering, pain, and adversity within their lives, which is a very hard thing to overcome, is because of the self. The self leads to destruction, the self leads to sin, and the self leads to suffering, pain, and adversity. So something within your life has to change. Something within your life has to be reborn. And something within your life has to experience rebirth. So dying to the self is how you experience the rebirth of the no self. And the no self is a life of spiritual contributions to helping other people, helping humanity, helping the universe. Now the self is where the suffering, pain, and adversity is. Most human beings live in the self. That's where they've never understood the no self or selflessness. Now, I'm not trying to scare people when I say dying to the self. Like I said, it doesn't mean passing away. It means dying to the ego, dying to the self-esteem, dying to any life experiences, suffering, pain, and adversity you experience, or sin that you've been through, and basically transforming that and transcending that to the no self and selflessness, which is basically the rebirth of no self. Now, in life, we only get one opportunity to do this. So within our lives, we only get one opportunity. Um, Life is always moving into the future, whether we like it or not. Everything's changing as we're moving to the future. People change, relationship change, family change, you change, children change, aspirations change. Everything always changes when we think about life. So it's important that we die to the self and actually find the rebirth of the no self. Now, in order to do this, there's different ways of how to die to the self. And it doesn't mean passing away, it just means dying to the ego, the self-esteem, selfish ambitions, selfish desires, and suffering, pain, and adversity and sin. So how do you die to the self? You need to go through a spiritual change. So what is a spiritual change? Spiritual change is a spiritual change of the psyche and the psychological mind. So when your psyche and your psychological mind changes, you've gone through a spiritual change, and that will mean dying to the ego, dying to the self-esteem, dying to selfishness and the self. Now, how do you basically go through spiritual change? You need to do the 5 spiritual practices: prayer, meditation, mindfulness, walking, journaling. If you do the 5 spiritual practices, do it daily when you have the opportunity to and when you have the time to. Slowly your mind will start to be renewed, and when your mind gets renewed, you live a completely different life to how it was before. Even though you may have the same body, you may have the same brain, you may have the same heart, the physical appearance of who you are may be the same, but something internally would have changed, something spiritually would have changed, your faith would have changed. So it's important to realize that dying to the self becomes the most important thing. If we don't die to ourselves and give up our lives to help other people, help humanity, help the universe, and help the animals, then we always live in suffering, pain, and adversity. And no matter what we do in our lives, we can try to achieve things, accomplish things, become more successful, become more rich. But that self will always be a part of us. So that's the thing that has to die. That's the thing that has to basically be destroyed, basically. A lot of people have said, and also in faith and spiritual religious books have said, if you die to the self and the ego, then your mind and your body and your heart and your whole being actually starts to find the rebirth and spiritual freedom, spiritual liberation, and spiritual enlightenment. But sometimes you have to destroy the past of who you was in order to find the new person of who you are in the future. The past, the present, and future is part of your life as well, because as human beings, we have a past, we live in the present, and we go to the future. So our lives are meant to be lived in a certain way, which Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha will give to you. It's normally a faithful, spiritual, and truthful life, but we can't find that spiritual, faithful, truthful life if we haven't gone through a spiritual change. So the spiritual change is what makes you do the 5 levels of helping other people. Level 1, volunteering. Level 2, jobs, careers, employment. Level 3, business, entrepreneurship. Level 4, faith and spiritual. Level 5, spiritually, helping other people who help other people. So it's so important to die to the self, to the ego, to the self-esteem. If you die to the self and the ego, then you have the rebirth of the no-self and selflessness, which is the most important thing to discover. You can only discover that by going through a spiritual change within your psyche and your psychological mind. So your psyche and your psychological mind has to change. If you still live a life of the self, it means you haven't gone through a process of spiritual change. And I'm not telling the listeners or the viewers who are listening to this content audio that it's going to be easy. Dying to ego and dying to self becomes the most difficult thing to do. But this can be the difference between spiritual enlightenment or no spiritual enlightenment. People go through suffering, pain, and adversity because of the self. So we have to learn how to overcome the self and find spiritual enlightenment, spiritual freedom, and spiritual liberation. So this normally comes through a spiritual change within the psyche and the psychological mind. So that's the thing that has to change. Your life needs to change. If you spiritually change your life, you spiritually change your thinking, you spiritually change everything that's involved in your life, then you have the rebirth of no self and selflessness, which is no more self, no more I, no more me, no more my. So it's important to really understand that the no self and selflessness becomes the most important thing. And the only way we get to the no self and selflessness is by spiritual change. So I hope this message really helps. It is quite a deep message, so I understand if it's a bit intense. But just remember, if you die to the self and the ego, you experience the rebirth of no self. And no self means you know yourself. Know thyself. And when you know yourself, you understand your life experiences, your difficulties, your struggles, your suffering, your pains, adversities, and all the things you've experienced, because you've gone through a spiritual transformation within the psyche and the psychological mind. So thank you for listening now. I hope this has helped. It's quite a deep message, this one is. And thank you for listening to the podcast and audio. Take care now. Bye now. Thanks.